19 years ago, I was committed to a psychiatric hospital, broken, addicted, and suicidal. And there, a God that I did not believe existed met me and spoke to my heart, and my life was completely transformed in a moment. So from childhood up until I was about 30 was a series of very dark storms for me. Storms that I did not know how to weather. I had no coping skills. I was raised in an atheist home, and I followed suit. I started using drugs at a very young age as a form of escapism. When you think about addiction, you think about addiction to a substance, but I know that my addiction was to escape, or was to hiding. Just before I turned 30, my dysfunction hit a critical mass. I had become increasingly delusional, suicidal. I had racing thoughts all the time, and I was battling nightmares. I had stopped eating. I was 96 pounds, and my mind and my body were dying. I just had this date in mind that my life would end, and I was on this countdown to this date, and I was terrified. I called my husband home from work, and I asked him to come home because I was so afraid. And we ended up in our family doctor's office. From there, ended up involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward. It had been my worst fear, and here I was. But at the same time, there was also a sense of relief because I could give up safely. I knew that even though my mind was racing and I didn't know if the nightmares would end, I knew I couldn't hurt myself there. I was mixed in with other patients. That's where most of my time was spent. And over the next 48 hours, I got to know some of them. And there was this one in particular, a very strange and quirky guy named Nathaniel. I still don't know to this day if Nathaniel was an angel or just a man with a message from God. But I know that everybody in the hospital that weekend had an experience with him. All of the ways that he had been engaging me had been pulling on my hurt. He sat down with a deck of cards. He laid down the Jack of Spades, and he told me he will always try to dig up your past. And then he laid down the Queen of Diamonds, and he said, she's the diamond in the rough. And then he laid down the King of Hearts and said, he is always Trump. And the moment he said King of Hearts, I don't know how else to describe it except that the knowledge of God exploded into my mind and my heart. It was as I suddenly knew him. I knew in a moment of clarity that my enemy would always be trying to pursue my past and had been digging up my past and had been using it against me. And I knew that I was the Queen of Diamonds and that I was a diamond in the rough and that there was work being done on me and that it wasn't finished. And I knew that he was the King of Hearts and that he was Trump, that he was over it all and that he had me. And in this moment, I knew that he knew me and that he loved me and that he was pursuing me. It was as if he swept away all of my hurt, all of the confusion, all of the shame, all of it at once. He covered it all in one moment. I had never wanted to live until that moment. I knew that no matter what had happened after this, that I wanted to be with him, and I wanted my life to be for him. And I knew that I was loved, and I received it, and I'd never, ever experienced anything like it. And at the same time that I'm having this revelation, my husband in a field 60 miles away from me, the Lord speaks to him and filled him with the same revelation that I was having, that he was the answer, that he was the future, that we needed to give our lives to him. And later that afternoon, when he came to see me in the hospital, sitting in my hospital bed during visiting hours, we poured out to each other the answer. I couldn't wait to see him, to tell him that I had hope and that we had a future, and that the answer was giving our lives to God. And I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what any of it meant, just that he was real and he wanted us, and that he was our answer and he had rescued me. And Scott came bursting out with the same thing, telling me that he knew, and he was so excited, and it couldn't have happened any other way. I sat on that bed, and my mind was completely clear. There were no racing thoughts. There was no fear. I was filled with a hope that I had never known before, and so was my husband. What we thought would be up to a 40-day visit or stay, or maybe even a transfer to someplace longer, I ended up being released the next day. I went home to begin this new life. I've had many storms since those days 19 years ago, but I have the most incredible buoyant hope, and there is a joy unspeakable that resides in me that I will never be shaken from. I didn't pray for a miracle. I didn't know I needed a miracle. I didn't know what a miracle was, but he gave me one all the same, and he changed my life forever.